Welcome back to the Investor Minded Framework. In this video, we're going to talk about building your financial foundation. So, we've already considered the risks and the rewards of real estate, the kind of introductory phase when it comes to any interest in investing in real estate. In this video, I want to talk about making an emergency fund, paying down any high interest debt, improving your credit score, also understanding the debt to income ratio and how that can play a role in the actual investment in real estate, and then also saving for the down payment, estimating any closing costs, and building cash reserves for any repairs that you have. All of these steps are something that will set you up for success and get you in a position where you can say that I'm financially ready to invest in real estate. So the first step is building that emergency fund. Generally, we're looking at 3 to 6 months of expenses. Beyond that, you'll build out to 12 months of expenses, which is going to help you out tremendously as seed capital for your first investment in real estate. Beyond that, you may need more than 12 months expenses, especially if you have a slightly higher down payment. A lot of these things just depend on where you live and what the general cost of real estate is. One of the benefits, at least across the US, that I have seen is a lot of areas, income and the actual expense of real estate can level out, but there are those areas where it just doesn't. It's one of those high appreciation markets, and you're not able to look at cash flow as much. My focus on real estate is much more cash flow focused because we're in the Midwest and a lot of real estate is focused on cash flow. I'm not looking at a property that's going to appreciate hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5 years. So, building that emergency fund, we're looking at 3 to 6 months of expenses. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, you can also consider paying down high interest debt and weigh the costs as whether or not you want to pursue paying off that high interest debt first or building that emergency fund first. I would be on the side of building that emergency fund because it puts you in a position to not have to take on more debt. So if you're able to just shove away maybe 1% and then do a gradual 1% increase on those percentages that you're able to save every single month, by the second month, you're saving 2%, then 3%, and then 12% by the end of the year. That compounds. By your second year, you're saving 24%. By the third year, 36%. Gradually, you're going to get to the point where you're saving 50% of your income, hopefully sooner rather than later. But if you do have high interest debt that has to be paid off immediately, I would consider that first, get that paid, and then any excess funds that you have that you don't need for living expenses, anything that you need, pay that towards your emergency fund, especially considering that high yield savings accounts are a thing. Something I use is Wealthfront. I've used a couple of different high yield savings accounts. Ally is another one that a lot of people use, and you'll end up getting a 3 to 4%, depending on the market, return on your funds that are just sitting there for a long time. And that's a lot better than the 0.07% that I was getting in my checking account. So that is definitely something to consider. Improving your credit score is something that matters a lot when it comes to investing in real estate. Of course, you can do some creative financing that doesn't require that background check on your debt, on your credit score. But if you're going to consider investing in real estate like I did, I was considering one of the most attainable forms of debt, which would have been the FHA lending, which is something that would require, I believe, at least a 650 or greater credit score. So that's, of course, something to research on your own because it may have changed since then. But back when I looked into it, that's what it was. And of course, lending has changed a little bit since then, which is something we'll probably get into later on, choosing other kinds of debt that you can utilize as well. Understanding your debt to income ratio matters a lot. Um, that plays a role with those last two things we discussed. Paying down that high interest debt is going to help your credit score. And then also by helping your credit score, you're able to qualify better for real estate. Generally, you'd be qualified by a lot of lenders for like 40 to 50% debt to income. So, how much debt you're able to take on, monthly payments to annual payments in comparison to the income that you make every single year. And so, I got to the point where the property that I bought was able to get about 30% expense for the income that I had. And I was making median income here in the US. So that was very, very good, but that's something that you do have to consider. That's a conversation to have with a lender as well. So I would highly recommend if you get in touch with your local realtor, they should be able to point you to a lender that can help you invest in real estate. That's something I'm more than happy to do here in the greater Lafayette area. And then saving for a down payment is also information the lender is going to be able to help you out with. After you've had those conversations about debt to income, what you qualify for, that helps set us up for looking at those properties. If I have somebody that comes to me and asks, hey, I'm interested in investing in real estate, one of the first things I say to them is, have you spoken to a lender yet? That's going to be the easiest way to get started in the process. You may find out if you're in a position where you're very cash heavy and you don't even need lending, all the better. But some people do have different considerations as whether or not it's better to invest all that cash in real estate or keep some on the side. And that's something else we can get into later as well. Once you've understood what your down payment cost is going to be, because for myself, I was starting out right out of high school making median income. What I qualified for was a $200,000 loan, just as an example, easy numbers. Well, I knew at that point I needed to get a 20% down payment. So it was going to be $20,000 to $40,000 in just a down payment if I was going to do a 20%. Cool thing was there are other lending options too. So FHA, for example, 5% down conventional for multifamily units. Small multifamily has become more of an option now. And that helps you understand what your actual closing costs are going to be. Some of those things you may not know until having that conversation with a lender. And then estimating closing costs is another thing that a lender is going to be able to tell you about. Everybody is concerned when coming to that closing table, making sure that they have enough funds to be able to buy that property. Luckily, you generally know beforehand how much you need to be able to bring to that closing table because there is the closing disclosure that the lender should be able to give you information on. And then also building cash reserves for any repairs. So, rules of thumb that I always utilize, and these expenses can change depending on the area. And this also can become dated as time goes on. But right now, one thing that I've always budgeted for is 13 to, well, giving an example of a recent roof replacement with some extensive repair, let's just say $13,000 to $18,000 for a roof. Yes, some people say you can get it for 16. Some people say you can get it for 14. Depends on who you talk to. Is it your guy down the road that knows how to do a roof? Go with who you trust. Do the standard process of getting 3 different quotes and then analyze based off those 3 different quotes who you trust and also the work that they're going to do. And then also understanding that that's one of the most expensive repairs you're going to probably do on a property aside from any major foundation repair. The roof is going to last for many, many years. So getting it taken care of will actually pay dividends. It'll save you on repairs. If you have a drywall repair, having to have someone come in and repair a hole in the wall because you had a leak. And that's one of the just biggest expenses you'll have to worry about. Beyond that, you also have HVAC repairs. Repairing a furnace can be sometimes around $8,000 for the full furnace replacement. Of course, it may vary depending on location. And then we get to one of the cheapest repairs, which would be a water heater replacement, $1,000 to $2,000, depending on if you do a tank water heater or a tankless water heater. That also depends on location. There are other parts of the world that generally only use tankless water heaters. There's some efficiencies with that, but there's also some added cost. And that's why it's really pays to do your research on those kinds of things. But those are the steps that it takes to build your financial foundation. And that allows you to say, I'm financially ready to invest in real estate. At that point, you're ready to move on to the next step.